catchphrase.
You're just saying that.
Well, welcome to Tri-County Church. My name is Chris. I'm one of the pastors here, and I just want to extend a warm welcome to all of our campuses, those that are downtown and Clearfield campuses, and everyone watching online, especially those, if you're in Florida right now or the Carolinas right now, I'm bitter. I enjoy the sun and the warmth, and we're glad that you're there and catching us online. It's incredible to think we're one church right where you are. Well, we're in the fourth and final week of this series called Catchphrase, and we've been looking at these phrases that, are awesome foundational phrases to us as a church. But here's the thing with a catchphrase. When you have this great phrase, but it never goes into action, it becomes a catchphrase. Like in our everyday normal life, when we say, let's get together soon, but soon never comes. Or maybe in a church context, when you say, I'm going to pray for you, but you just never get to the action. Well, they become catchphrases. And so there's these four phrases that we've been looking at. Well, three in the last 3 weeks, and then one as we conclude this series. And our commitment is that we never allow these phrases to become catchphrases. So the very first week when we kicked off this series, we talked about that Jesus is the subject, and everything we do is to point people to Jesus, to help connect people to Jesus, because Jesus changes lives. You and I, we don't change people's lives. Jesus changes lives, but we as a church want to point people, because when Jesus becomes the subject of someone's life and then becomes the object of their lives will be radically shifted. It's amazing what happens. So many of you on the spiritual journey, when you took that, you remember that moment or that season of life when you're like, okay, Jesus, I'm all in. I'm all in. So we're going to point people to Jesus. The next week we looked at this phrase. It looks a lot like love, and it's one of those things we all can see. When we see love in action, we're like, that's it. That's amazing. And when we see love not in action, we can all sense it and tell it. And we're just going to be a church that is radically committed to loving all people, people that look like us, don't look like us, people that believe maybe like we believe, or maybe don't believe like we or you believe. We're going to be committed to extending to love to people that have the same value systems that maybe we have, or maybe vastly different value systems. We're just going to love all people. Why? Because Jesus loves all people, and Jesus is the subject, right? They all go together. Then last week, we took a look at hope has a name. Jesus is the subject, and hope is his name. Jesus, he overcame the world. And this world is broken and fractured, and we're going to talk about that towards the end as we kind of look at this next series we're going to jump into. But it's a broken and fractured world. We all get that. And Jesus said, no, I overcame the world. That's why we have hope in him. And see, all of these three link together into what we're going to look at tonight. And if you missed one of these weeks, or maybe you're a first-time guest and you're just jumping in, and you're like, this is like the last 30 minutes of a movie. You're like, I missed everything else. Here's what's amazing. Technology is great. You can go to tricountychurch.net, and you can watch this entire series. You can actually watch all the series last year and the year before. It's all available. And maybe if you are like, I really want to go back and watch another one again, you can go to tricountychurch.net. They're all there. Technology is amazing. So for our time today, we're going to end this series looking at this final phrase. And what's amazing is these other three phrases all loop into this last one, which really moves us into action. And the phrase is all about being the church. But here's what we all know. Just the word church, it's complicated, isn't it? All of us, when we hear the word church, we attach a lot to that. Think about the first time ever to Tri-County. Maybe that's right now. Maybe your first experience right now is online. You logged in because someone's been hounding you on Facebook, and you finally said, okay, I'll watch. And it's your first experience. Think about your first experience to Tri-County. Probably, I don't want to speak for everyone. Probably it was a much different experience than any of your other church experiences, right? Maybe a friend, a family member, work associate was like, come, it's different, come, it's different, come, it's different. You walked in the doors at any of our campuses or logged on online and connected and you're experiencing church. And if you came to one of our physical campuses, you walked in and you saw people, a lot of people, and they're smiling and happy. And it seemed like they liked each other. In your past church experiences, you walked in and not everyone was smiling and not everyone liked each other and not everyone was happy. And it blew you away. You're like, oh, this church, they like, people like actually want to come. You walk through one of our lobbies. Again, if you're watching online, I'm sorry you missed out. You walk through one of our lobbies and you grab an awesome cup of coffee and a donut, a snack, and you're like, oh, they're like providing like legit like food, not like the stuff locked in someone's cellar for years that was donated. Like, it's like, this is good stuff. You're like, wow, this is awesome. You start experiencing a service and you sat there and you're like, oh, okay, I'm not sure what to do with the lights and the screens and the video and the band and it's loud or not too loud or I like it loud. I mean, all of these thoughts in your first time experience, and maybe for you as you sat there, you started thinking through to yourself like, I can't tell my mama or my daddy that I'm at a different church. I can't let my grandma or grandma know that I'm at a different church. Some of you get this. And you find yourself sitting there going, I kind of like this, but I can't tell them. Because if they find out that I left the church that I grew up in or the denomination I grew up in, if I tell mama and dada about that or grandma and grandpa, oh no. And then you start playing this script in your mind. You start thinking to yourself, okay, now I know lying's wrong, but if I lie about the church I'm going to, is God okay with that? Like I'm in church. Right? Like I want to save my relationship with my mama and dada. It's like, is God okay with, no, don't lie. I mean, there's other ways around, right? But it's like, you felt that tension. And then maybe, just maybe you had the moment towards the end of the service and you find yourself going, I got something out of it. I don't know, maybe something in one of the videos kind of grabbed you, maybe a word or a phrase in a song, because now you could actually understand some of the words in the songs, because your church growing up, you just didn't really understand beautiful, beautiful songs. I'm nothing against them. But some of you are reading a translation of the Bible and you don't understand that translation. You're like, what? It's beautiful old English, but it's old English. And you leave going, I think I like that. My church growing up wasn't fun. My church growing up, See, all of us, when we think about this word church, we all start to attach different perspectives, different constructs, different emotions to church. And a lot of those emotions go all the way back to childhood, don't they? What was church like for you as a kid? Maybe it was just not a conversation at all. You just never went to church. It was never discussed. Zero sum. Maybe for you, your family was the Easter and Christmas experience and you loved it, especially Easter, because you got a new Easter dress. And you're like, when I go to church, I get something. That's happy. The rest of the 50 weeks of the year, it just didn't talk about church. Maybe for you, church growing up was just absolute boredom. The thought to sit there and sit there and sit there and sit there, and you're like, and you just think church is boring. For some of you, church was where angry people were, because you walked in and people were yelling and screaming at each other. Right. See, for all of us, our childhood starts to paint the picture of what the church looks like. And so when we talk about be the church, all of us, guess what we bring to the party? Oh, so much. So one of the purposes of today is this. Are you ready for this? Oh, this is great. Okay, this is one of the purposes of today. We're going to deconstruct what was constructed so that we can reconstruct what Jesus intentionally constructed. Got that? Okay, we're going to leave that up there for a moment. So if you want to snap a shot, you can snap a shot, write it down, right? But here's one of the purposes of our time together. We're going to deconstruct what is. Every one of us have a construct of what the church is. And we're going to try to deconstruct what is constructed. We're going to try to do that with this intentionality, to reconstruct what Jesus intentionally constructed, because Jesus had a purpose for the church. And if we can step back and say, okay, Jesus, what was your purpose of the church? Then maybe we can start to deconstruct what is constructed in our life to reconstruct what he intentionally constructed. There's going to be a test later, just so you know. Just so you know, if you fail, well, joking, by the way. Don't sit there going, is there really a test? Yes. It's a new thing in church where you just give tests. Not at all. So this is one of our purposes for our time today. And where we're going to start is this. At the very beginning of the church, Luke wrote what we call two books in our modern New Testament. It's the Gospel of Luke and the book of Acts. And what's interesting is those two books are now separated in our New Testament, but when they were originally written, they were one book, kind of two volumes. And over time, they just kind of renamed them. The Gospel of Luke was Luke writing the story of Jesus. And Luke is very, very, very detailed in his storytelling, his writing about the life of Jesus. And as he wrote volume 2, which we call the book of Acts, it's the historical telling of the very beginning of the church. And we find great level of detail into the very beginning of the church. So in Acts chapter 1, Jesus is there. It's the resurrected Jesus, and he's meeting with this entire group of people. And you have to just think that in this moment, I mean, they're leaning in, but it had to just blow their mind, right? One moment, he's being persecuted. One moment, Jesus is being nailed to the cross. One moment, he's being put into a grave, and now he's alive. And Jesus is meeting with this massive group of people, and he's like, okay, here's what's going to happen now. Jesus is like, I'm going to leave this earth, and I'm going to say go, and you need to go. And it's launched to the church. And they're like, no, Jesus, you need to stay longer. He's like, no, I have a different purpose right now. But now it's up to you. And so they went into action. And from Acts 1 through chapter 2, you see the birth of what we call the church. And by the time we get to verse 42, something really cool is happening. And this is what Luke tells us. They devoted themselves to. Now, the word devoted is an awesome word because it's not just that they were like all in, 100% in. It's not like they were just like really, really excited. There's this underlying word attached to this word devoted. It's the word perseverance. No matter what came their way, that they were going to keep following Jesus. No matter what troubles, what persecution, what family infighting, no matter what happens to them, that they were going to be devoted. But for me, even though that word is really cool, the word I want to focus on is the word they. Who was they? They devoted themselves. Who was they? They was a group of people like you and me. They didn't have, this massive, degree in the Bible. They didn't have time to really think about what their calling was going to be from God because they found themselves right in the middle of this moment where Jesus said, I'm leaving, now go. And this they was this group of people that either was a part of that moment with Jesus, or after Jesus left, it was they who were starting to follow Jesus, become Jesus followers. It was this they. Oh, they. Some of they had seen Jesus crucified. Some of they had seen him conquer the grave. Some of they maybe never saw Jesus crucified, maybe never saw him alive after the grave, but they knew someone who did. I mean, This they lived in a very small town. You think about towns like Du Bois and Clearfield. Everyone knows everyone, right? Everyone's connected to everyone. I've stopped asking people, do you know, and fill in the blank with someone's name. I've just stopped because everyone's like, oh yeah. And they're related to, and they're related to, and they're related to. Everyone's related to someone here, except for me. I would like to be related to someone. Anyone going to volunteer? Anyone? Okay. Oh, we got hands. Anyone online? Okay, great. Right? So they either firsthand witness, saw, experienced, or they knew someone who did. And it's because that they devoted themselves to. Well, we're going to get to what they devoted themselves to, which is great. But before we do that, I want to go to the very end. Because what happens at the very end sets the stage, sets the direction, and it's critical to understand why they devoted themselves to these things, because of the outcome of their devotion. And here's the outcome of their devotion. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. See, in result of their devotion, more and more and more Jesus followers. That was the result of their devotion. And I know you could read the lines, daily, those being saved. And you're like, right, every day, like that would be kind of a cool moment to think about, like, could that actually happen now in today's world? Like every day, could someone come to Christ? Or after a year, could there be 365 people in a church that actually chose to make Jesus the subject of their life? And it's like, yeah, no, it's happening. It's happening around the world. I'll never forget the first moment when I was in Vegas at this amazing church and just so committed on being the church that God called the church to be. And I'll never forget the year where we walked into staff meeting and our lead pastor announced that in that calendar year, it was I think it was up over 400 people had made Jesus the subject of their life for the very first time. And I remember there as a young leader thinking back through this question, like could that really happen? And all of a sudden I find myself in a church that is so committed to being the church that God designed it to be, that guess what happens? Daily those who are being saved. So the result of their devotion, and this is critical because we're going to keep coming back to this. So there's 4 things that they're going to devote themselves to. And I attached an action to every one of these things they devoted themselves to. And so my encouragement for you is this. You can write these down. I'm even fine if you want to take out your phone and snap a picture of the screen so you can keep them. If you're online, you can just screen capture them. But there's 4 actions that are going to be attached to these 4 areas that they devoted themselves to. And this is what Luke tells us. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. So those are the 4 ones. So let's look at the very, very first one. It's the apostles' teaching. The apostles' teaching, we're going to focus on the teaching part in a moment, but to clarify the apostles' part in this. You see, this was such a unique period of time. And the apostles, they were apostles because they were with Jesus. Jesus had poured his life into the apostles. He mentored them, he discipled them, he taught them everything. And so in this moment of time, God used the apostles specifically to teach. I mean, the New Testament in this moment hadn't been written. I mean, they had the Old Testament, but now, guess what? There's a new storyline that God was divinely writing. And so it required the apostles, again, who were with Jesus, to teach people. And what's happened over the years is there's this thing that kind of filters in and out of all churches, all denominations. And there's this thinking that there has to be a title for you to teach the Bible. There has to be a title for you to read the Bible. If you have the degrees, and the degrees are important, I'm not against that. I got my Bible college degree, but there's this thinking that you have to be so qualified to read and teach the Bible. And that wasn't the design. Again, church is being launched. This group of the apostles, they were there. Why? Because firsthand, Jesus poured into them. But then you see over the time, guess what? More and more people. As they were being taught, guess what they were doing? Teaching others. Teaching others. And when we think about teaching others, and we think about the Bible, Again, I don't know where you're on in your spiritual journey, but whether you're not sure about God or not sure about Jesus, not sure about the Bible, or you've been a Christ follower for decades, something happens when we say, read your Bible, okay? And this is one of the things that happens. All of a sudden, our pursuit becomes about knowledge. And knowledge is good. Like, this is not bad, so don't hear me say that. I'm an avid reader. I'm an avid studier. I got more stuff in my brain that if I could just, like, erase it, I would. But, right, knowledge is fine. But our pursuit when we are taught God's word, our pursuit when we read God's word, our pursuit when we study God's word isn't about knowledge. It's about knowing God. There's a difference, isn't there? The pursuit is about knowing who God is. That should be our pursuit, the end isn't about knowledge. It's to really get to know who God is. Get to know his heart. What excites him. What makes him upset. What his mission is truly all about. What he desires for you and from you. It's about knowing God. So here's the action. The action is this. If you're not sure where to start in your Bible, maybe you do. Maybe you've never done this. Here's the action step. Read the Gospel of John, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But as you read it, just don't read it. Again, it's not about consuming knowledge. Ask yourself this question, who's God? And a little longer question is this. Who is God the Father through the life of God the Son? Jesus. And if you just take time, and this is not a race, it's not, can I read the Gospel in John in 22 hours and 35 minutes? Again, the pursuit isn't consumption, the pursuit isn't knowledge, the pursuit is to truly know God. And if you just read the Gospel of John and ask the question, who's God? Who's God the Father through the life of God the Son, Jesus? The Gospel of John will explode within your mind and your heart. Second thing they devoted themselves to, fellowship. It's a great word. So many times people look at that word and they just think it's about hanging out, community, relationships, and it's definitely a part of that. But here's the thing that most translations leave out. They leave out this definite article, and the definite article is the word the. And it actually reads, the fellowship. Like there's this gathering of people that intentionally come together. There's this group, the fellowship, that comes together. Again, relationships are important. Fellowship is important. But think about it through the lenses of saying that, okay, they're going to listen to the apostles' teaching in the fellowship, meaning that intentionally they're coming together. This applies itself to two ways here at Tri-County Church. One is it's church. Like, come to church. Make it a commitment to come to church. Parents, if you have kids, man, your kids need to see you commit on a consistent way to come to church. There's something about coming together. The second one is what we call life groups. It's smaller groups of people meeting in houses and cafes and coffee places around our local communities. And it's taking a large number of people and say, hey, let's come together intentionally, consistently for fellowship. So one of the action steps is this. Consistently go to church. Seriously. Like not once a month. That's not, I guess that's consistent if you go once a month, every month. And here's what happens. I don't have time. I'm busy. I got my kids, they're in every sport and drama and art and work and all this stuff. It's like, no, it's an hour and 5 minutes, right? And it's so important. And remember that they devoted themselves to being together. We all need each other. We need to encourage each other. We need to high five each other. We need to pray for each other. We need to help each other take spiritual steps. We need to help each other in times of need. We need to be together. Some of the times, if not most of the times, if not all the times, when you don't feel like going is the time that you need to go. And if you're consistently going to church, like take a step and get into a life group. It's another action step. That's just a bonus action step. But get with a group of people that you can fellowship. Third thing they devoted themselves to, breaking of bread. And we can spend a lot of time here, and we're just not going to, because there's a lot of kind of Jewish spiritualness to this idea of breaking of bread. And if you know anything about the Jewish tradition and customs, that they always had some type of spiritual feast, and it was all around food. And here's the thing, like, there's nothing different with our lives now, right? Everything's around food. Right? Every holiday, there's some type of food. Super Bowl's coming up. And it's like, do we care about the game? No, because the Steelers and the Cowboys are out. Like, we don't care. And that felt so good to say. Like, I would hate to have to say, and the Cowboys are out, right? Like, I'm glad we could all enjoy that together. And, right? But, right, it's about the food. It's like, who's bringing what? How good of food, right? It's about the food. And so as we look at this breaking of bread, there's several things we could talk about. One is there's a deep spiritual kind of component to this. One of those is what's called communion. And we took communion the week before Christmas here at Tri-County. We took communion, or we're going to take communion before Easter. And it's so important, okay? But there's something also just very simple about eating with people. And as I sat thinking about this is how I framed it. Here's the action. Eat with a purpose. Eat with a purpose. I mean, not like eat with a purpose, you know, right? Like, I mean, do that too, that's fine. But eat with a purpose. Maybe there's someone that you know is struggling spiritually in their marriage, in life, and call them, say, let's go eat together. And the purpose is you intentionally creating fellowship, community with that person. If you have kids, the best discipleship times, I'm just telling you, parents, it's around the dinner table. It just is. So much spiritual discipleship happens around our dinner table. And we always ask this question, highs and lows. What happened during the day? What's great? What's bad? Man, so many moments. Like helping our kids learn what it means to love everyone, even the kids that are hard to love. Eat with a purpose. Someone that you've been praying about to come to Tri-County Church. Maybe invite them over to your house first to eat. And if you're a horrible cook, I don't know, get Chinese to go. Dump it in a bowl in your house and act like you cooked it. I don't know. Right. There's always, eat with a purpose. So the last one is this. They devoted themselves to prayer. Devoted themselves to prayer. I mean, if you, again, go through the Gospel of John, powerful. Ask the question, who is God, or who is God the Father through the life of God the Son, Jesus, powerful. Another powerful thing you could do is this, is go through the book of Acts and look at every time a group of people, they pray, what did they pray for? And what were they going through? Because when you look at what they're going through and then what they prayed for, especially when you get to Acts chapter 4, read that moment. But they intentionally devoted themselves to prayer. So here's the action step. This is simple. Talk with God daily. Daily. That's in the shower. That's making your coffee. That's driving to work. That's taking the kids to the bus stop, right? Like be consistent. Like just invite God into that daily conversation. Well, Luke goes on. He goes, everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. He goes on. He goes, they sold property and possessions to give to anyone had need. I mean, this right here, we could spend a whole message on this. Like generosity erupted from within this they. Because they saw what Jesus was doing within them and through them, what Jesus was doing in this collective of fellowship, the fellowship, and all of a sudden they started responding to people's needs. Goes on. It says, every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God, enjoying the favor of all the people. And here it is. The Lord added to their number daily those being saved. See, something has kind of creeped. And if you're a church person, if not, you can just tune me out for a few moments. I'll let you know when you can re-engage, it's good. But if you're a church person, then you know who you are. There's something that's kind of creeped into churches, and it's these two words. The words are evangelism and discipleship. And it's almost like people have just strategically just broken these words apart and said, no, there's evangelism, wall, discipleship. And here's how it's kind of worded. Well, I don't really have the gift of evangelism, but I'm really committed to helping people grow spiritually. Have you said that? Have you heard someone say it? In a church context, this is what people say. Well, that church, they're really seeker sensitive. Again, if you're not a church person, you're like, what? I'm like, I know, it sounds crazy, doesn't it? If you're a church person, you know what I'm saying. They're a seeker church. Or someone will say, no, that church, they preach the Bible. They want people to grow spiritually. And here's what amazes me. Those two were never meant to be separated. Not because Chris Trethaway thinks so. Not because this is my opinion. Jesus, again, before he left, he gave the Great Commission. It's found in all four Gospels and in Acts chapter 1, verse 8. So in Matthew, this is how Jesus worded it. He says, therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. Let's go back to the very beginning. Therefore, go and what? Make disciples. And here's what happens. Again, remember, somehow along the way, we separated evangelism from discipleship. And does Jesus do that? No, he says, go and what? Make disciples. You know what he's built in here? To make disciples, what must be present? Wait for it. Non-disciples. People who aren't disciples of Jesus. People who aren't followers of Jesus. People who don't know Jesus, people who are walking their own path away from Jesus, people who have doubts about Jesus, people who maybe don't even care about Jesus, right? To make disciples means that you're going finding people who aren't followers of Jesus and walking with them, guess what? To point them to Jesus. And Jesus said, no, therefore go and make disciples. Go find people who aren't following me. And pour your life into them. Pour your life into them. So this is what happens. And in any illustration, it can break down, okay? It can. So I know any illustration can break down, but this is how it looks. And all of you just lean into this moment, okay? So down at this end, there's a -5. That's like the most evil person you can think of. I mean, you could put Hitler there, you could put Manson there. I mean, I don't know, your relationship with your father-in-law. I mean, right? Like whatever you think. I mean, that person, I mean, they're evil, they're way far away from God, they don't care about God, they're way down here. On the other side, there's this +5, and that's like that super spiritual person that you kind of look up to. Maybe it's an author you've read, maybe it's Mother Teresa, maybe it's Billy Graham. I mean, we're not talking perfection, right? Like if this line kept going, Jesus would be, I don't know, at 1,000, right? We're only at +5, right? But there's those spiritual people you look up to. And what happens in spiritual journeys is somewhere along the way, they accept Christ right here. It's amazing. And if you remember that moment when you named Jesus as the subject of your life, that's an amazing moment. Amazing moment. Your life will forever be changed. And what happens is you're excited. You want to start growing spiritually. You want to start growing spiritually. You want to start growing spiritually. You jump into things. You grab a Bible. You ask people, what does this mean, right? You're growing spiritually and you're excited. And then somewhere along the way, somewhere around the +2 area, right? Somewhere along that, there's a very intentional or unintentional decision that's made. And I've seen this everywhere. It's so common, so common. Either your desire now is to be +3, +4, +5, and you start saying things like me, what I need spiritually, how I need to grow spiritually, what I must do spiritually, what you should do for me spiritually. Or you realize that the Great Commission, Jesus is talking to you. And that for you to grow spiritually, for you to grow in your faith, is to live out what Jesus told you to live out. And that's this: to make disciples. To make disciples is intentionally go find people that walked away from God, don't know God, doesn't like God, not sure about God, they have questions about God, people that they don't talk like you, have different value sets as you, right? Believe different things as you, and intentionally go find people. And again, remember, our goal as Christ followers, I can't make someone believe in Jesus. That's not my goal. God's not holding me accountable to whether or not they accept Jesus or not. What God is holding me accountable for is making disciples and being willing to what? Devote my life to walk with them and point them to Jesus. That's my job. That's my call. That's your call. You're they, right? This is not a pastor role. This is not a Bible college educational conversation. No. If you're a Christ follower, Jesus is saying to you, go and make disciples, baptizing them, teaching them, and walking with them. And I'm just telling you, when you do that, guess what's going to happen in your spiritual life? I'm just telling you. When you're sitting with someone and they're asking you the big questions of the Bible, and you're like, I don't know. You know, one of the most powerful things you can do with someone that you're walking with on their spiritual journey is to look at them and say, that's a great question. Let's discover the answer together. You know what happens when you do that? Your faith is going to deepen. Your understanding of who God is going to deepen. But if you don't do this, you're never going to grow in your faith. Because God's heart is about everyone. Everyone. Because he died for everyone. So when we say be the church, we're saying, as you go, intentionally build relationships. As you go through the rhythm of your life, say, God, here's a great prayer. God, who? Today, who? Who can I intentionally eat with a purpose? Who? And devote yourself with perseverance to walk with them, pointing them to Jesus. Pouring your life out into them because of what Jesus has done in you and through you. You see, the gravitational pull of every church is to keeping people, not reaching people. It is. And we as a church are absolutely committed to fighting that gravitational pull. And we're going to do everything we can to reach people. Not because that's my idea or this leadership team's idea or the staff's idea. It's what Jesus said as he was leaving this earth. Go, make disciples, find people who aren't, and walk with them. That's what we're going to be about. That's what we're going to be about. So what you see around Tri-County, which is so different than so many other churches, I get that. But it's different because of this. To reach people no one else is reaching, we must do things no one else is doing. And we're doing things that no other church is doing. Why? Because we're asking the question, how can we do whatever we can to go connect with people that don't have a relationship with Jesus and walk with them. A few weeks ago, this screen showed up on the Hill campus. Now, if you're watching online or in Clearfield or downtown, you probably really noticed the change, and you probably have one perspective. And for everyone on the Hill, you probably is like, well, do we really need another screen? You're like really? Like, is sometime I'm gonna walk in here, we're gonna have screens around all the back walls and on everyone's seats? Yes, we're working on that. No, not at all, right? And so on the Hill, you might be, and maybe you're like, I never noticed there's a screen, right? Like, this might be a new description. But here's what you need to know if you're on the Hill. We want this teaching experience to connect with everyone. And here's what would happen. If you're watching online or at one of our campuses, every time our incredible team would switch to a slide, all of a sudden I would disappear, or the communicator would disappear from the screen, and all they would see is a slide. And it disconnects people in that moment, doesn't it? Why would we rather sit toe-to-toe with someone, eating with them, than just being on our phone? Like, there's something about, right? There's something about seeing people. And what we discovered was, if we could kind of shift how we did this moment for all of our other campuses and those online, now this teaching moment, guess what? Right? It now engages. They never lose sight of the person communicating. And it draws them in. And you know what we're hearing from people watching online at all of our campuses? Oh, how much it has engaged in that time. So just know, we're just not going around going, we're bored, we have nothing else to do, let's throw up more TVs. I mean, please, I hope you know that. Everything we're doing, what? Is focused on going and making disciples. So next weekend, we kick off a new series. I can't wait for this series. And I just want to give you kind of the insider on this. This is for you, no matter where you are in your spiritual journey. We're going to look at some very hard questions, especially as we look around our globe and here within our states. And I don't know if you've had this experience where you're flipping through Facebook or watching the news or looking at your news app, and you're just thinking to yourself, what on earth? What is going on? This world is falling apart. And I'm not sure if you've taken the next step just to ask the question, where's God in the midst of all this chaos? Where's God in the midst of all this evil? Where's God in the midst of all of this? And so we're going to take some time, and we're just going to kind of unpack all of that. And here's what I know. There's so many people. I mean, they want to lean into God, but they look at this world, and it's a struggle for them. And our heart with this series, again, it's a great opportunity for you to go, invite, bring, go to dinner before or afterwards. Because not only is it going to be great for us to go on this journey together, but we're going to be looking at some of the major questions that people who have disconnected from God, the issues they have. So with that, we're going to give you a preview of the video that we'll start playing next week. So here, why don't you check it out?
He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole